When a woman kills for the first time, she can become hungry for more.
Once this killing spree started, I don't think anyone around her was safe.
A nurse betrays her patient's trust to satisfy dark desires.
She could only feel pleasure when she was inflicting pain.
A shopaholic mixes trips to the mall with murder.
She really enjoyed what she was doing. She got a thrill out of it.
And a babysitter calls an end to playtime by killing.
It just amazed her that she could do this and nobody pick up on it.
These are deadly women, damaged by life, excited by death. They are disturbed. When a mind is disturbed, death and pleasure can become entwined. As they were one night in 1889 at Massachusetts General Hospital.
I have something for you to drink. It'll make you feel better.
Amelia Finney is a patient in pain. She hopes the medicine will bring relief. But her nurse's intent is not to heal. It's to harm.
She had no empathy for others. She enjoyed what she did.
She could only feel pleasure when she was inflicting pain.
Nurse Jane Toppan gives Amelia a toxic cocktail. As Amelia feels the effect, she's joined in bed by her nurse.
Can you imagine the fear? Waking up in your hospital bed with your nurse straddling you, looking into your eyes, and you are helpless to do anything, even cry out because she's overdosed you with a sedative?
Professor Harold Schechter believes Jane Toppan was one of the most dangerous nurses who ever lived.
Jane Toppan appeared to the world to be a very jolly and caring and nurturing human being. But of course, underneath that, she was the very opposite.
To understand what motivated Jane's crimes, Schechter would have to turn the clock back almost 150 years to New England in 1863. An alcoholic called Peter Kelly enters a Boston asylum. A sole parent, Kelly wants to be rid of his young daughter once and for all.
He was obviously totally incapable of dealing with her, and he put her into an orphanage.
6-year-old Jane will never see her father again. A well-to-do family later takes Jane in, but she is not treated as an equal.
Well, she was taken into this family called the Toppans, but she was never formally adopted, even though she took their name.
The Toppans have a daughter the same age as Jane. But while Elizabeth is lavished with affection and gifts, Jane is treated like a servant.
What are you doing here? Go away. Finish sweeping.
Jane feels excluded. Something in her mind is changing.
Beautiful.
She is becoming disturbed. "20 years later, Jane Toppan is a student nurse.
Hello, Mr. Chick.
While her fellow trainees are motivated by compassion and kindness,
Got a special dose for you today.
Jane is driven by darker desires.
The decision to become a nurse was hers alone, and I believe that decision was to gain access to potential victims. Hospitals became happy hunting grounds for her.
A great advantage of nursing for a personality like Jane Toppan is that it gave her ready access to very helpless victims that she could torture in the various ways that she enjoyed.
Jane is fascinated by the effects of drugs, especially morphine, a drug familiar to forensic pathologists like Janice Amatuzio.
Morphine is an opiate medication. It's been used for centuries to relieve pain. But like all other opiates, when it's used in excess, it has a very dangerous and profound effect.
Jane experiments with poisons on her patients. Patients like Amelia Finney.
Jane Toppan administered some medication to her that put her into a deep slumber, but she was still semi-conscious.
How do you feel?
Morphine has a profound effect, and that is on the respiratory system. And when the respirations slow down, the oxygen in our blood decreases as well. So there's going to be loss of consciousness. And so morphine will depress all of the systems, and in an overdose, the person will simply stop breathing.
But Jane doesn't want Amelia to die, just yet.
And she felt Jane Toppan get into bed with her and pull her bedclothes aside and begin to caress her in a very, very erotic manner.
Amelia thinks she is dreaming, but the reality is far stranger. She's in the clutches of a nurse who feels perverse pleasure while watching her patients die.
Jane does not fit the classic profile of the mercy killer, the nurse killer, because of the sexual component of her crimes, of poisoning her victims with morphine and then crawling into bed with them and holding them and kissing them and then looking into their eyes as they were dying. This is not what we usually see. Jane was different.
Tonight, Jane Toppan's desire to kill will be unsatisfied. When someone else enters the ward, the murderous nurse flees. Amelia Finney recovers. Only years later would she realize how lucky she was that night. Her nurse would go on to become the most prolific female serial killer in American history.
She wanted to be the best and the most famous in the world, the highest body count. She might have achieved that.
Jane Toppan is known to have murdered 31 of her patients. She may have killed dozens more.
Nobody had ever encountered a female murderer, or really even a male murderer, who had killed so many victims so cold-bloodedly.
Jane is so disturbed it doesn't matter who she kills. Where there is death, she finds pleasure.
She murdered young and old. She murdered male and female. She murdered intimate friends and total strangers.
Yet there is one person she wants to hurt more than any other.
Thought I'd bring you some tea. Thank you, Jane.
For 30 years, she watched her foster sister Elizabeth enjoy a life of happiness and privilege. A life Jane herself could only dream of. Now, the time is coming to make her pay. In the summer of 1899 on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, Elizabeth Brigham has mysteriously fallen ill. Her foster sister Jane appears eager to nurse her back to health.
She was a very, very successful private nurse. You know, people just thought that she was a very caring human being.
But Jane Toppan is not what she seems. She will kill 31 people and become America's most prolific female serial killer. Her latest target is her own foster sister.
The primary motivation seems to have been this long simmering resentment of a foster sister who had always seemed to receive so much better treatment from life than she herself had.
Go away. Finish sweeping.
Jane's jealousy of Elizabeth begins in their childhood. When Elizabeth marries a wealthy vicar, it intensifies. Once again, Jane feels left out.
Psychopaths like Jane Toppan, who feel they've been horribly mistreated by the world from a very, very young age, grow up to feel the need to take revenge on the world in turn.
For Jane, this revenge will be sweet and slow.
Jane Toppan took a great deal of pleasure in prolonging the pain and suffering of her victims, really stretching it out over days and even weeks.
A lot of killers are not sadistic. Jane was. She actually derived pleasure seeing the pain that she had inflicted on others. That is sadism.
Jane's sadism climaxes as Elizabeth takes her final breaths.
There are female serial killers who derive perverted sexual pleasure from inflicting death on their helpless victims. And Jane Toppan fell into that category.
Later, Jane admits that Elizabeth is the only victim she truly hated. This murder had a clear motive, but what about Jane's other victims? Could her murderous desires be tied to the mental history of her own family? The father who abandoned Jane when she was a child would later succumb to insanity.
His nickname was Kelly the Crack, as in crackpot. And there were these stories that at one point he sewed his own eyelids shut.
But while Jane's father suffered psychotic episodes, losing touch with reality, Jane herself had no such symptoms.
Her father's act of trying to sew his own eyelid shut is indicative of a very, very severe mental disorder, either schizophrenia or bipolar psychosis. Both of those are inheritable, but I don't think Jane Toppan was insane. Not at all.
Jane is clear-headed and calculated when she kills, making her all the more deadly.
Serial killers like Jane Toppan, they have to murder more and more frequently in order to produce that rush of pleasure.
Jane has been killing for 15 years. But when she's contracted to care for the Davis family, she takes her murder spree one step too far.
I don't think serial killers want to get caught. They simply get sloppy. They get away with it so many times that they begin to think they're invincible and invisible.
Jane is supposed to keep the Davises safe from harm. But one by one, over a period of 6 weeks, she kills them.
She ended up wiping out this entire 4-member family, and that is what ultimately led to her discovery and arrest.
The death of an entire family turns suspicion onto nurse Jane Toppan. She denies the killings, but under questioning by psychiatrists, she confesses in disturbing detail.
Jane was the type of sociopath who liked to brag about what she did. I'm sure every time she bragged about what she did and it shocked people, including the board of Victorian doctors, that gave her even more of a thrill.
Jane shows no remorse. the telltale sign of a sociopath. She spends the rest of her life in a mental institution and is remembered as the most dangerous and disturbed nurse who ever lived.
We perceive nurses like Jane as these angels of mercy who will care for us and nurture us and bring us back to health. Jane Toppan, of course, was the very opposite of that. She was an angel of death.
A disturbed mind can lash out when it's least expected, as it did on a clear morning in Canyon Lake, California. 38-year-old Dana Sue Gray is setting out on a shopping trip.
There was something about money and having it and spending it that made Dana Sue feel important.
She looks like a typical suburban mom on her way to the mall. But Dana is a woman with a startling secret.
She used ligature strangulation. She used bludgeoning. She used knives.
Dana Sue Gray is a psychopath. She just committed a brutal murder. Now, she needs some retail therapy. Detective Joe Greco will never forget the gruesome crime scene Dana Sue Gray left behind that day in 1994.
It was a shock because it was only my second homicide case as a detective, and it was overwhelming.
66-year-old June Roberts has been strangled and bashed with a bottle.
It crossed my mind that I had a serial killer on my hands.
No one has ever seen a serial killer like this one.
She's in a class all her own.
The killing spree begins 2 weeks earlier.
Norma! Norma, are you there, dear?
The community was very affluent, and they didn't have a lot of homicides.
Norma!
Alice Williams has not seen her neighbor, Norma Davis, for 2 days.
Where are you, dear?
She's concerned the 86-year-old has fallen ill. The reality is far worse.
A neighbor came by and found her body. The neighbor was never the same after that.
The brutality of the murder also shocks crime writer Kathy Braidhill. Norma has been stabbed. A fillet knife is buried to the hilt in her chest. The handle of another protrudes from her neck. The blade inserted so deep, it has almost severed Norma's head.
We didn't have a lot of information. The only piece of evidence that we had was in the entryway of the condominium. Found a faint shoe print on the floor of the condominium, and it was a 6.5 size shoe.
The shoe print would later be traced to a former nurse named Dana Sue Gray.
Dana Sue Gray was in her mid-30s. She loved thrill sports. She loved rock and roll.
As a young woman, Dana enjoyed skydiving. But increasingly, it's her personal life that's going into free fall.
Dana's life right before the murders was chaotic. She had a lot of emotional setbacks. She had had a miscarriage. She had also sunken into depression and alcoholism, and she was accused of stealing drugs from her job as a nurse.
Fired from her job. Separated from her husband. She seeks solace in alcohol and prescription drugs.
We really don't know why she had started to use drugs. We're thinking perhaps it was because of the depression from the miscarriage. It could have been any number of things.
But when the drugs don't work, there is one thing guaranteed to make Dana Sue feel good.
Spending, purchasing made Dana feel high. It reduced her anxiety. It became compulsive, and it got way out of control.
Dana Sue is hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. Her disturbed mind is becoming desperate. Desperate enough to kill.
Once this killing spree started, she was clearly out of control. And I don't think anyone around her was safe.
2 weeks later, 66-year-old June Roberts answers a knock at the door.
Hey, June, look, I was wondering if I could
Recently widowed, June welcomes the visit by a family friend. Little does she know, she has admitted a killer into her home. A killer who leaves her boyfriend's 5-year-old son waiting outside.
I think the fact that Dana Sue had her lover's 5-year-old boy in the car with her, waiting outside in the car while she went into these homes and killed these women, really speaks to the coldness and how little she thought that what she was doing was wrong.
Here it is, look.
It was very brutal. The victim had been strangled with her own telephone cord and actually tied to a chair. And she was struck so hard it fractured her skull.
She used her hands and extreme violence to kill her victims. We don't usually see this in female serial killers. We usually see poison or gun. With a gun, you can kill someone from afar. Dana Sue wanted hands-on.
But perhaps just as shocking as the murders is what Dana chooses to do next.
She didn't even go home after she killed these women and lay low for a while. She just needed to get to the mall.
Canyon Lake, California, 1994. 38-year-old Dana Sue Gray is in the mood to be pampered.
Dana was so meticulous about her appearance, and she always went to a salon for services, for manicures, pedicures, hair color, cotton color, all of that.
Beauty treatments make Dana Sue Gray feel good. But lately, she's found another activity that gives her a thrill. Murder. Dana is halfway through a month-long killing spree. Her first stop after killing her second victim is the mall.
What was taken from June was her checkbook and her credit cards, and right after the murders, Dana went out and she got a beauty treatment and she went shopping.
She immediately went out and drained their bank accounts and used their credit cards on high-ticket items, hundreds and hundreds of dollars, with a little kid in tow, her boyfriend's little 5-year-old with her. Thought nothing of it, thought nothing of it.
Despite being hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, Dana Sue is obsessed with spending money.
Dana Sue's issues with money are reported to have existed when she was a girl. Her brother described this. She said, "I had to spend, it made me feel good." That the feeling wouldn't last, so the behavior became compulsive. She would repeat it to get the high again.
Psychologists have a term for compulsive shopping: oniomania. But it is not the only reason Dana kills.
Dana didn't take any rings from the victims or some valuables from the home that were obvious. So I don't think anything was motivated there by money.
The next attack reveals more about Dana's motives. 2 2 weeks later in Lake Elsinore, California, 57-year-old Dorinda Hawkins is working alone in an antique store.
Dorinda was working at the time Dana had walked in and asked about picture frames.
Just wondering how much this one is.
This is actually $55.
Do you do gift wrapping?
Yes, we do. Give me a minute.
And it was there behind the framing tables that Dana strangled Dorinda.
Dorinda was begging for her life when Dana was strangling her. And Dorinda told her, "You can have anything you want, take the cash. You know, I have 8 kids, just let me live." And Dana told her, "I'm not doing this for the money." She said that twice. And that really gives you an insight into what Dana was thinking when she was committing these crimes.
Thinking Dorinda is dead, Dana Sue steals just $25 and flees. But Dorinda is still alive. She's had a lucky escape from a woman with a long history of violence.
When Dana Sue was a young girl and she would be reprimanded or punished by her mother, it was reported that she frequently lashed out violently as a little girl and grew up to do it as a woman.
Dana Sue is motivated by more than money. She also has a deep-seated need for power, a need she satisfies with murder.
Dana liked the fight, and we believe that she killed because she enjoyed having power over somebody and watching them struggle and watching them die.
There is something hidden in Dana's past that explains not only why she killed, but who. As police trace the clues left by her shopping sprees, the final piece in the puzzle of Dana Sue's disturbed mind is about to be revealed.
We were able to do a paper trail with the credit cards and go to the different stores that she had used these credit cards at. And with the merchants, we were able to get a general description of this suspect.
I'm wondering if you've seen this woman.
The shopkeepers recognize the face. So do residents of Canyon Lake. Dana Sue Gray is arrested for murder.
When they finally did apprehend her, her Cadillac was full of grocery bags. Her house was full of expensive perfume. I mean, she had a veritable department store in her house.
We have statements proving that you had spent these cards.
Dana Sue Gray denies the murders. But while she is questioned by Detective Joe Greco, the case takes a horrifying turn.
In the interview, Dana began talking about finding a purse, and that purse belonged to a woman by the name of Dora Beebe.
In the station, at the same time, there were sheriff's deputies working another murder. Joe went to them and asked them the name of their victim. They told him Dora Beebe, and Joe instantly said, "Well, we have your suspect in the other room."
Earlier that day, Dana Sue had knocked on the door of a stranger, asking for a map.
So I knew that we had the right suspect in this case, but I did not know that on the same day that I was serving the search warrant, she was out killing her last victim.
Just wait a minute, then I'll be out.
Like Dana Sue's other victims, Dora Beebe is elderly, alone, and totally unprepared for a vicious attack.
What are you doing?
Dora Beebe was found murdered inside her home. She was beaten with a clothes iron, and her skull was fractured.
To psychologists, the attack on Dora Beebe is the final clue in a revealing pattern. All 4 of Dana Sue's victims were elderly women. women old enough to be her mother.
Dana Sue had a lot of unresolved anger toward her mother. I think these older women that Dana Sue killed represented her mother, and she was just unleashing rage and anger.
To avoid the death penalty, Dana Sue Gray pleads guilty to multiple murders. A desire for money, a need for power, and a hatred of her own mother. Dana Sue Gray's disturbed mind made her a ruthless killer who will spend the rest of her life behind bars.
Then when you look at her history and you see how violent she could be as a child with her mother when she was reprimanded, this was a murder spree in the making for 30 years.
She enjoyed doing things that were risky. She was a thrill seeker, and I think that she really enjoyed what she was doing. She got a thrill out of it.
Human instinct demands we protect the young. But sometimes instinct is overruled by stronger impulses. A disturbed mind can transform a protector into a predator. Lakeland, Florida, 1980. 4-year-old Jeffrey Davis is getting to know his new babysitter. Christine Falling gets along well with the little boy. Jeffrey's mother believes she is leaving her son in safe hands.
I think that she was doing a good job as far as, as taking care of the babies,
But this babysitter's playful persona is hanging by a thread. A thread that is about to snap. When the mother of Jeffrey Davis returns home, she walks into a nightmare.
Certainly it was a terrible blow for anyone to lose a child, especially, babies.
Christine claims the boy simply stopped breathing. The autopsy blames a heart condition called myocarditis, a condition that is very rarely fatal.
Now, myocarditis is really considered a cause of death only when everything else has been excluded.
Jeffrey is not the first baby to die in Christine Falling's care. And he will not be the last. When the deaths are reported to the sheriff of Calhoun County, Buddy Smith, he knows something isn't right.
It was just a strange thing that all the babies that was in her care had died, and it was a mystery there for a good while.
Many put the trail of dead down to bad luck or an unknown virus. No one dares to imagine the children are being murdered by their slow and apparently harmless babysitter.
It seems that she had maybe a nice nature.
Hey, Christine. Hey, Grace. How are you?
And people maybe thought, well, Christine couldn't possibly have done this. She's too slow. She's not maniacal. And so they ruled her out.
Yet the seemingly gentle Christine Falling started killing early.
Oftentimes, when young children abuse small animals, it's acting out rage and frustration over something they can control.
As a child, she would test if cats had 9 lives by dropping them from a great height.
She grew up fairly poor, and families did not have good paying jobs and make a lot of money, And I think probably from the beginning had some problems.
Local police were well aware that Christine didn't have a happy childhood. She was abused sexually and physically.
I recall the former sheriff, W.C. Reeder, worked a case where the child was taken to the hospital. And the first word he got from the mother was that she had gotten run over by the car. And he got to checking into it further and found out that this child had been beaten pretty bad with a bottle.
Because of Christine's family situation, the early life poverty, the low IQ, I don't think she stood a chance of having a normal life.
Poverty and abuse leave their scars on Christine. But they are not the only reasons she becomes a killer. By the time she turns 18, Christine Falling is a ticking time bomb.
Ready?
3 days after the death of Jeffrey Davis, Christine Falling is asked to babysit again. She will look after 2-year-old Joseph Spring while his parents attend a funeral.
Say bye-bye.
The funeral of Christine's previous victim.
With her background and her educational background, she just did not have the ability, you know, to get out and get good jobs. And she just picked up jobs like babysitting. And she felt like, I guess this was the only way she could maybe make some extra money and survive.
Christine has a childlike quality that children find appealing. But it is not an act. She has below normal intelligence, making her disturbed mind deadly.
People with very low IQs, such as Christine, tend to also have a low frustration level. And they will sometimes lash out in an irrational rage.
When Joseph starts to cry, Christine feels her nerves fray. Then the voices start. Voices only Christine can hear.
The voices are not usually very nice. They say horrible things, they suggest horrible things.
Auditory hallucinations are a symptom of a well-known psychiatric condition.
Schizophrenia is a disorder of thoughts and thinking, and it's very difficult, if not impossible, for the schizophrenic to know if the voice is real or not.
Shush.
Joseph has been silenced, but the voices in Christine's head have not. Soon, they will instruct her to kill again. At a children's graveyard in Calhoun County, Florida, tombstones bear witness to lives cut tragically short. Some by accident, some by illness, some by murder.
You know, I was just amazed that it wasn't picked up on sooner.
In the early 1980s, a babysitter called Christine Falling is killing children in her care. Authorities believe the deaths are of natural causes.
She never gave a good explanation as to why, other than she'd saying these babies would start crying and she couldn't get them to hush.
Leaving a child alone with Christine Falling, even for a moment, can be a deadly mistake. As her stepsister, Geneva Burnett Daniels, is about to discover. When Geneva goes inside to buy diapers for her 8-month-old daughter, Jennifer, the baby begins to cry.
People such as Christine can't handle it when things don't go right. And sometimes they will lash out or attack whatever it is that's making them upset.
Christine's low IQ means she is already reaching breaking point. But it's another mental condition that will push her over the edge.
Christine suffered from frontal lobe epilepsy. One of the things that we do see oftentimes in people that have this, along with a low IQ, is that they later are involved in violent crimes.
Like Christine's other killings, this one leaves no trace.
Sometimes smothering may leave no clues whatsoever, particularly if smothering, which is blockage of the airways, is caused by placing something loose or fluffy, such as a soft blanket or a pillow loosely over the mouth and nose. It may leave very few clues.
This baby ain't breathing.
Jesus. Christine, what happened?
I don't know.
Oh my God! Oh my God, what happened to her?
5 babies die in Christine Falling's care. Under pressure from the local community, she checks herself into the hospital, asking doctors to find out if she's passing on a mystery disease to the children.
I really think that her desire was that somebody really find out that she was killing these babies.
The doctors find nothing, and Christine asks them to call the police.
And she says, okay, I'm ready to tell you.
Sheriff Buddy Smith will never forget what she said next.
She said she had a way of choking these babies without leaving any signs. But she said, you know, it just amazed her that she could do this and nobody pick up on it.
Christine admits to smothering 3 children. Police believe she also killed 2 other infants and a 77-year-old man. Poorly educated, mentally disabled, and brutally abused, Christine Falling's future has never been bright. And now she will spend it behind bars.
I was pretty much convinced after working this case that is, if you're mistreated by your parents or someone else, then you tend to be the same way whenever you get grown.
She's often said in her incarceration, I think back, I wonder why I did this. I don't see her as a sociopath. I see her as a very poor soul, who, by the way, needs to remain in prison.
For these deadly women, murder became a habit too strong to resist. Nurse Jane Toppan found pleasure in her patient's pain. Dana Sue Gray's lust for money and power made her murder on the way to the mall. And Christine Falling let her anger explode on kids who couldn't fight back. Life dealt them suffering, and they returned it in kind, driven to murder by minds that were disturbed.